Welcome to the Holistic Success Show. I'm Elizabeth Lozano.
And I'm Dr. Robert Puff. Today we're going to have a positive psychologist coach.
We're also going to be answering a question about getting remarried when you're older.
And about what do you do if your child has ADD.
And we're also going to be watching some clips from Dr. Puff about his near-death experience. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the show.
I have an experience I'd like to share with you that happened to me many, many years ago. I was 15 years old, and I haven't shared it with a lot of people, but it was a very pivotal point in my life. For a brief amount of time, I had experimented with drugs. It was only a few months, and then I stopped, thank God. But during that time, I had a very negative experience that happened. I had experimented with some drugs, and it was a very awful experience. Probably one of the most awful experiences I've ever had. And I remember it was so terrible. My heart was just beating out of my chest. It felt like it was going to explode. And I really thought I was going to die because it was just beating so incredibly strongly. And then all of a sudden, I couldn't feel my heart beating anymore. And I went somewhere. I want to describe to you what happened when perhaps my heart stopped beating. All of a sudden, I was in a place where instead of my mind going like it is now, it was going an infinite times more quickly. Instead of just thinking about, as we do on a daily basis, I could think faster than humanly possible, faster than any computer in the world at the time. I just could really understand what was happening in my life. And what I did is I saw my life from the beginning to where it had been at that point, 15 years. And what I saw was my life and really the whole universe was perfectly planned. There were no accidents. It was just perfectly planned. And that made no sense to me at the time. And then another part of the experience was that when I was seeing things around me, instead of them being typical like you and I see, they had their own light. They glowed. They had their own light. They were giving off their own light. If you've seen the movie Avatar, it was very much like that, where instead of it shining light, they themselves were the light. And it was beautiful beyond description. It was just stunningly beautiful. And then also was my heart, not my physical heart, but my emotional heart, was in a place that I can only describe as bliss. It was pure and utter bliss. It was like, oh my goodness, this is so beautiful. This is so wonderful. I never want to leave here. But more interestingly, it wasn't like I was going to a place that I'd never been before. It was like I was going home. I was at a place that I had been forever, and I was returning back to it. I had just forgotten that place. And as I said, it felt so warm, so blissful, so beautiful inside. And everything was well. It was just like everything was well. And it was just magnificent, is the words I can use. And it lasted for a while. I just stayed in this place for quite a while. I don't know how long, because time was unmeasurable at that time. I couldn't tell how long time had passed. But for whatever reason, I felt my heart start beating again. And I just noticed that, I came out of it, and I was very elated for quite a while. But then when I came back to this world that we live in now, a kind of a deep depression hit me, because I wanted to go back there. That was such a beautiful experience. That was home. And this didn't feel like home anymore. So what I want to share with you in the next episode, if you stay tuned, is how I came to terms with that now, many years later, and how it's impacted my life. Peace.
Our first question this week comes to us from Margie in Surprise, Arizona. I'm a 70-year-old woman who has fallen in love again. My husband passed 10 years ago, and I never thought I could love another man. My boyfriend and I have been dating for 1 year, and he asked me to marry him, which I accepted. The problem is my unsupportive family. Everything was fine until then. What can I do?
Congratulations, Margie. I'm really glad you fell in love again. But you falling in love doesn't mean your whole family is going to fall in love with him too. It's pretty normal what you're experiencing, usually, particularly as we get older, when we fall in love again after a divorce or a death. Not everyone is supportive. And I think having that expectation, being there, is going to get you in trouble. You need to say, I'm going to get married because this is important to me, but not everyone's going to be happy with that. And I wouldn't rub it in their face and try to make them happy, but realize not everyone is. They were in love with your previous husband, of course, and that's who they knew. And so that change is hard for them. But I think if you don't make a big deal of it, and you support him and you love them too, and don't forget them and don't make it all about him now, I think you'll find a good balance there where you can love him and love them without expecting them to totally fall in love with him like you did.
The interesting thing is, Margie, when I work with clients, I often say to them, what would you do in this situation if you were 70 years older and you were looking down at the situation you're in now? And often people are able to say, you know what, I would go ahead and do it anyway because I matter, and what matters to me, my happiness is very important, and it is no matter what age you're at. And we're not always going to get the support from the people we love from every choice that we make, but now is your time to experience that love and grow. And I think that you could be a really great role model to your children and to your family to say, I'm not doing this to hurt you, but I'm doing this because this is important to me. And I would love your support, but even if you're not supporting me, this is what I'm going to choose to do.
So Margie, even though not everyone's supporting you, Elizabeth and I are there in spirit and heart with you, and we wish you the best and wonderful marriage ahead for you.
Yes, we do. Thank you so much for your question. I'd like to welcome Dr. Jack Singer to the show. He has been referred to as the Patch Adams of psychology. He's a clinical consulting and sports psychologist, and he also is a professional speaker. And on top of that, he has also written this book, The Teacher's Ultimate Stress Mastery Guide, as well as this audiobook, Remarkable Resiliency Skills for Uncertain Times. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. It's really a treat to be here.
Wonderful. So can you tell us a little bit about these items that you've created?
Well, I wrote a book for teachers because, as you probably know, it's one of the most stressful professions there is. And in addition, teachers, all through my career in working with teachers and educational associations, I've discovered that they're under-recognized, and
definitely.
Somebody needs to speak out for them. No educational institute that I was able to find in their Department of Education offers a stress mastery preparatory kind of guide for teachers. So it was something that was really needed, and that's why I did that. In terms of the resiliency skills, that's based on a speech that I give all over the world, really, for organizations on how to deal with uncertain times and to keep your resiliency strong.
So how does one keep their resiliency strong in tough times?
Well, there's a secret that I'll share with your entire audience.
Okay.
And that is, everyone has what I call an internal critic. That's a little voice inside of you that speaks to you constantly, and unfortunately, about 94% of what that voice says to us is negative. Once we learn how to control that internal critic, we can then master the stresses in our lives and develop remarkable resiliency skills that we'll be able to count on regardless of the situation and the challenge that we face.
I know in your book you talk about how negative thoughts can impact your immune system. Can you share with our audience how, if you have positive thinking, that can affect you in a positive way?
There's a tremendous amount of research that's shown that when you think negatively, it sets off a chain reaction within your subconscious mind where your body thinks that there's an emergency and muscles tighten up, adrenaline squirts into your bloodstream, your heart rate increases, your breathing increases, all of these things that should happen if there's an emergency, but it's only from a negative thought. And so if people are doing that constantly during the day, they're stuck in traffic, they're frustrated with their children, they're having marital difficulties, whatever the case may be, work-related problems, and they're constantly worrying about those things, they keep setting off this emergency system called the fight or flight system within their body. We now know that the continual setting off of that switch breaks down the immune system. So if you can reverse the process and think positively and learn to stop those negative thoughts dead in their tracks, you can actually enhance the immune system.
Where would you say that these negative thoughts kind of stem from? Where do they start?
It's a really good question, Elizabeth. The negative thoughts come from our parents and other important people in our lives as we're growing up, many of whom are well-meaning but misinformed. And they may tell us things like, don't try out for the sports team because you're not that good an athlete. I don't want you to be embarrassed.
It's so damaging when they do that. Those are the words we never forget.
We never forget them. And what we do is we have a subconscious mind that's supposed to be a garden of flowers, and in this case, parents and these other people introduce weeds into that garden, and then we take over where they left off by fertilizing and watering the weeds and continue to talk to ourselves in negative ways.
Yeah, I often tell the people that I work with that, and I think they look at me kind of funny when I talk to them about positive affirmations. Like, you want me to talk to myself and tell myself I'm a good person or I'm successful or I can do these things? And I'm like, yeah, you're trying to reverse the brainwashing that's been going on since they were little kids.
Exactly.
And those are the things that when I work with people, they remember, oh yeah, my dad said I was stupid when I was a kid.
Exactly.
And it may have been one time, but that one time, and usually it's not just one time, but that one time made a difference. Or that teacher, unfortunately, there are some teachers out there that have said, well, you're never going to make it in this, or you're never going to make it in that.
Right. And this book on teachers really addresses how to deal with all of these situations, and whatever situation they run into in the classroom, how they can overcome that and be a successful teacher.
So what would you say is the underlying cause of stress for most people?
Well, you know, events that take place in our lives don't cause stress. We have choices when those events take place, and the choice is how we interpret the event, and again, what we say to ourselves about that event. So the number one cause of stress is looking at events and thinking something negative about that event, like a statement that starts with "what if" is always followed by something negative, like what if I get in trouble here? What if my spouse is unhappy with what I've said? What if I can never control my eating habits? Whatever the case may be, those are the negative things that begin to erode at our resiliency and cause stress-related illnesses and emotional problems.
And that leads into a little bit about pessimistic versus optimistic thinking. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, it's really fascinating, the research that was started by Seligman at the University of Pennsylvania on optimism. He has a book called Learned Optimism, in fact, and it really is fascinating, the research that shows that people who are optimistic, and by that he means folks who have negative things happen and they find a positive way to look at that without blaming themselves and thinking this will be a chronic problem, those people are successful.
Which I think in any situation we can find that. Even sometimes it's that whole thing, hindsight's 20/20. Well, yeah, we could have changed something differently, but I find even in my own life, all the negative things that have happened, I'm thankful for them because they've steered me in another direction that has been a positive thing for myself.
Right. And if you look at negative things that happen, Elizabeth, and you find a reason to explain them other than beating yourself up about it, then you have success. And it's even been shown that cancer victims with the same cancer as other people in the other control group, the optimists live an average of 7 years longer than the pessimists.
Wow, that's saying a lot.
Yeah.
Now, I know you also do hypnotherapy. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that ties into everything?
Hypnosis is the most powerful tool that I know of. I wasn't even a believer in hypnosis when I went to graduate school. I thought it was hokey stuff. I have now become such a believer and have seen such miraculous things happen with hypnotherapy. I use it with elite athletes, for example, to help them stay in a zone and stay focused on their sport so they can maximize their performance. I use it with people with chronic illnesses to remediate symptoms and remediate pain. And I use it with people to keep their self-esteem high. So hypnosis and hypnotherapy has been really a hallmark of the treatment that I use with almost anyone I see.
And speaking of sports psychology, I know you've got a plethora of these other things. Can you talk a little bit about these?
Yeah, these
sets?
are hypnotic series for athletes. One is called Core Sports Performance. Another one deals with pain and how you can remediate the pain. And another one is rapid healing of injuries. 3 issues that you can see that athletes would be very concerned about.
Yeah, most definitely. I think other people as well.
Yes.
And then you also, just in closing, you also have this book. Can you talk about
this
this?
dynamic health book where Bernie Siegel is one of the featured speakers, and I was lucky enough to be asked to be one of the speakers as well. This is alternative health people talking about their methods of helping people overcome illness and prevent illness.
I know in a lot of your material you talk about the importance of humor for overcoming stress and a lot of other things. Can you talk a little bit about that?
The research on this, Elizabeth, has been nothing short of fantastic. We know now that when people laugh, they actually release endorphins in their brain, the same kind of endorphins that runner's high is from. And these endorphins have a tremendously positive effect on the immune system. So we know if you can keep laughing and keep smiling and keep having fun in your life, regardless of the challenges that you're facing, you can actually enhance your immune system. One of the reasons I'm known as the Patch Adams is because when I speak all over the country for keynote speeches and so forth, I make them fun and lively and have everybody laughing because I want to practice what I preach.
Yeah.
I want to give people a zap in their immune system every time I talk.
So in closing, where can people get a hold of you and some of your materials?
Well, they can reach me on an 800 number, 800-497-9880, or they can contact my website, which is www.drjacksinger.com, the doctor's abbreviated, or they can email me at drjack@askdrjack.com.
Thank you so much for being a guest on our show.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Earlier in this episode, I shared with you my experience where I had a brush with what I believe was death. And during that brush with death, something very, very beautiful happened inside of me. And I felt like, as I said earlier, I had gone home. And then when I came out of it, I was here. And I didn't want to be here anymore. I wanted to be there. But I wasn't there. So a depression kicked in. I just so badly had this most beautiful, blissful experience that God, the universe, had given me. And then I was forced to be here. And I said, I don't want to be here. I want to be there. I want to be there. That's home. That's home. I remember my heart just saying, I want to go home. I want to go home. I want to go home. I actually can feel it right now as I say it. But I wasn't allowed to go home. I was 15 years old. I had many years ahead of me still to live. And it caused me a lot of suffering because I didn't want to be here anymore. But thankfully, I was exposed to meditation. And meditation, through my learning and practice of meditation, really taught me to be present in the here and now. And as it taught me that, even though I knew that was my home, I felt like this is where I am now, and I needed to be okay with where I'm at now. So meditation really helped me to be here now. And that longing, though still there, became much, much less. And the freedom came, the ultimate freedom came, where I said, whether that experience ever comes back again, which I'm sure it will when I die, but until that time, if I ever get that experience while I'm alive again, I will be okay. And then something beautiful happened. I began to have the experience again. Not ever as quite as intense as the original experience, but I started in my meditation, and sometimes even outside of there, a reoccurrence of that mystical experience, that blissful, mystical experience, where I'm just back in this beautiful place, where everything is just beyond belief blissful. And the freedom has come, is that now when it happens, and it actually happened just 2 days ago while I was meditating, and it came back to me again. Now when it happens, the freedom I feel is, it's okay. I let it go. I'm very glad when I'm given that experience. I don't look for it. It just usually spontaneously arises. Sometime when I'm meditating with other people, they get to have that same experience too. You can ask Elizabeth about that. And so it's something that I think that we can experience, I believe, and something that we can all ultimately have inside of us. And perhaps it is all of our homes. But the freedom I've learned is love now, be here now, and realize there is something beautiful out there. I'm looking forward to it. And sometimes, God, the universe, gives me those experiences, but not always, and not being attached to them. And that was something that we really tried, probably the greatest attachment I've ever had, is that one. I wanted that one. But when I learned to let go of it, when I learned to say, it's okay, I don't have to have that. I would prefer to have that, but I don't have to have that. A beautiful boon was given to me. I periodically get that experience again. And that's what happened to me a couple of days ago. And I get it periodically. Again, as I said, I don't look for it. But when it comes, I'm very glad. And I don't hang on to it. It's just like sometimes you have a really wonderful meal, and sometimes they're not as good. But when you get that really beautiful meal, you do enjoy it. And I enjoy those experiences of being home. But I'm also very glad to be here with you, because I think I've been left here for a reason, to share my life with you. And hopefully together, we can all grow holistically and be healthy together. Peace.
Our second question this week comes to us from Karen in Port Hope, Ontario, Canada. My son is 8 years old and was just diagnosed with ADD, and I do not want to give him medication. I know there is a more holistic approach. Can you suggest an alternative treatment?
Well, Karen, I really do agree with you. I really try to stay away from medications for many reasons. The main one is that when kids take medication when they're younger, later when they get older, they have a hard time differentiating between that and illicit drugs. Because I've heard many kids that are teenagers say to me, I've been on drugs since I was a little kid and now I'm in high school. What's the difference? And we, of course, know there is a difference. And there is time to use medication with ADD and ADHD, but we way over medicate. It makes it easier for the teachers, it makes it easier for everyone else, but it really isn't helpful for your son. And what I love is physical activity. When your son is struggling at school, help him to be active. During recess, have him, if he's not being attentive, be active. Watching his diet, what is he eating? Sugars are really bad for kids. And really learning about and studying the affects of ADD and how you can help your son improve. There are many, that's a complex issue, so we can't really answer it shortly. But there all are alternatives. The one I like the best is having him be physically active to dissipate that energy. And when he's home, make sure he's eating right and not watching things on TV that really add to or feed his ADD.
I'd like to piggyback off of what Dr. Puff just said, because I think it's really hard. Now we've got the schools that are so compacted with so many children in it, and it's really hard for a teacher to be maintaining all these kids, especially if you've got one that's kind of bouncing out of their seat. So really make sure you talk with the school, and if they can modify your child's education a little bit for them, or the planning of where everything is, make sure that they're sitting in the front of the classroom and they get to take regular breaks. There's a lot of things that are really important. Diet as well. There are some foods that are known to kind of trigger some of the problems that children with ADHD and ADD have. I would definitely go to a holistic health practitioner and talk to them about the possibilities. Go online and search, but I think before you make any final decision or changes, make sure you get the support that you need. And also find a therapist who can help advocate with you in the school, because it can be hard sometimes in the school. They're so inundated by things, and there's a lot of kind of hoops you need to jump through.
So really you're on the right path. You're saying, are there alternatives? Yes, there are. You may still end up being using medication, but explore your alternatives. Never go to the simple solution. Look at everything, watch things, study, read, get on the internet, and then decide what's best for your son.
Thank you so much for your question. This week's quote is by George Eliot, and the quote is, "It is never too late to become what you might have been." This is such an important quote, because if there's one thing I can teach you is never give up on yourself, and remember that it's never too late. Thank you for joining us on the Holistic Success Show. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our website, and you'll get emails about our upcoming shows, as well as a free PDF book from us.
And at our bookstore, also at the website, we have a variety of books, CDs, and DVDs for your growth and health.
Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.